Hello class. In this week's lecture, I'm going to be reviewing a student sample of the researched argument. And this is the research argument student sample number 1, which you can find in the weekly materials. And in hopes of keeping this lecture somewhat brief, I have taken it upon myself to make notes in the margin, which I will be reviewing for you in the video, simply to point out some of the aspects of this paper that are working very well. And by no means do I use student samples as a method of making students feel like their writing needs to look a certain way or be a certain way. Instead, I just like to use student samples to show you things that are working, and in some cases I'll show you things that are not working. But in this lecture, we're going to talk about things that are working really well, so that this week as you move through revising the rough draft of your research argument, you can bring some of these ideas to the front of your own mind to make sure that you are doing all of the things with your final draft that you want to achieve. So part of the assignment instructions for the research argument is that you use MLA formatting. So in this paper, you see perfect MLA formatting. And I have a note here that says the student uses perfect MLA formatting in the heading and title. We have 1-inch margins. We're using Times New Roman font. The font size is 12 point, and then double space lines. The heading, and I think I actually meant to say that is the title. The title of the paper is related to the topic without stating the actual claim itself. So we have the heading is the student's name, my name, English 1190, and the researched argument, and then the date which the assignment was due. And then just below that we have a title. The title does not actually make the claim. It just gets readers interested in what topic is going to be talked about. And I'm not going to read through this entire paper, but I just do want to highlight some of the major aspects of the paper that are really working very well. This is a paper that earned an A in my class. It earned a high A. It's very well done. So I definitely think spending some time with the research argument student sample number 1 is going to be a good idea as you revise your own paper. Excuse me. So this writer wrote about why there are few women in STEM fields. And right away, the opening line addresses the topic itself. And this paragraph develops the idea of the topic by introducing a problem related to the topic. So that's what I say in my notes here. The opening paragraph introduces the topic and the problem with some details about the problem. And this is pretty ideal. You want your first paragraph to identify your topic and to explain why something is a problem. You never can assume that your readers will know what the problem is or even what the topic means. So you need to decide, based on your audience, how much background information are they going to need in order to understand the argument that you're setting up. As we move to the second paragraph, there's a little bit more detail about the problem and why it's a problem and what we should start thinking about needing to do about that problem. So, the student talks about what we cannot do and what we must do, and then says, in my research, I've reached a deeper understanding about this problem and how complex it is. And then finally, we see the claim here, and I say that the second paragraph poses some questions that lead to the claim, and that the claim addresses a specific audience, schools and employers, and the claim calls upon that audience to address the problem. So this is another piece of the researched argument instructions that I've asked of you, is that you identify a specific audience and that you think about what that audience needs to know in order to be persuaded by your argument, and whether or not that audience is actually in a position to do anything about your topic. It doesn't necessarily make sense to gear an argument toward an audience of people that either doesn't know anything about your topic, or maybe doesn't care about it, or last of all, is not in any kind of position to make a change. So when you're thinking about your audience, think about who can actually make a change related to your topic, and whether or not you should actually address that audience in your claim. Or if not that audience, which one? And then what do they need from you in order to be persuaded? Your audience should be a real driving force behind your argument. Okay, so then we're on page 2. We're moving to the first full paragraph on page 2. And my comment here is that the first body paragraph opens with the writer's own idea, and the whole paragraph explains just one idea related to the problem. So in terms of why there aren't many female students in STEM majors, the main idea here is that perhaps the problem is not due to their grades, but rather their lack of confidence. So this paragraph addresses the lack of confidence that females may have approaching STEM majors and then by extension, STEM careers. So from there, any source that is presented in this paragraph is correlated to this idea of female confidence in the STEM field. So as I say here, we have a source. It's introduced clearly with the title and the author's name, and the source itself supports the writer's main idea that young women may lack confidence, and that is why they do not take STEM courses or major in STEM-related disciplines. So the writer here presents some of the research from the source. All of that research supports their own idea. And then anywhere else where the writer mentions information from this particular article, there's a parenthetical citation, and I say here in my notes that the parenthetical citation perfectly matches the first piece of information listed for this source on the works cited page. So if you're a reader and you're interested in reading this whole article, then you know you can go to the works cited page and look for the name Morrison, and you're going to be able to find the full source information and look it up on your own if you're interested in doing that. That is the purpose of the in-text citation, is so that readers can do deeper research on their own if they're interested in the information being presented here in short form. Then they can go, and I'm going to scroll really quickly here. We'll come back to page 2 in a moment. But they can scroll right down and skip all of this and say, that Morrison article sounds really interesting. And of course, this works cited page is alphabetized, so I'm going to look for the M for Morrison and say, oh, okay, Morrison, here's that article. I'm interested in that. I want to read that, and I can click right on this link to do that. So the student does really well in each body paragraph, letting their own ideas be the driving force of the paragraph and using sources that simply support their own ideas. Additionally, this particular student, and I say this in my comment here, the student writer uses personal experience and anecdotes throughout the paper to bring themselves into the conversation, which is a really great move. Any personal experience or stories that you might have that relate to your topic that you can share, those are only going to make you sound more credible to your audience and really show your audience why the topic is important to you. From there, and the student does this throughout the paper. So I just think this is a really great move to use. Your own experience, your own personal input is a wonderful addition to a research paper. And then the last note that I make on page 2 at the end here is that the writer begins and ends all of their body paragraphs with their own ideas. The writer's ideas are the driving force behind each body paragraph. So I challenge you, take a look at each of your body paragraphs. Do you have a quote that's starting your paragraph or ending your paragraph? If so, that means your ideas are not the driving force. That means quotes from other sources are actually the driving force in your paper, and that's not what you want for your argument. You want to be the front and center driving force behind all of the main ideas of your paper. Sources are there just for support. Okay, top of page 3, we have a new paragraph, and I made a note about the first word, however. This is a transitional word, and in this case, it's used to show how the ideas in this particular paragraph are going to relate to and actually flow from the idea in the former paragraph. So the writer is really in command of the structure of the paper, and the structure refers to how are you grouping paragraphs, how are you grouping ideas, and what order are you presenting those paragraphs and ideas. And it's important to show a reasonable or rational logical flow between your ideas. So this particular writer does a great job with that. They begin with an idea, they show how the next idea connects to the one before it, and I just think that's a very strong move in a research paper when you're really pulling in a lot of different ideas. You have to have a very clear sense of how to organize those ideas. Another thing this writer does a great job with is the sandwich method. We talked about the quote sandwich method in this class, how to incorporate source ideas while also using your ideas to be the driving force. This writer is just really good at that particular skill. So the sandwich method to incorporate sources means that you first introduce your own idea and introduce the source, incorporate the source material and some research from that source, and then follow that up with interpreting the source's information or ideas and connecting it to your own ideas. And again, this student does a great job with that. And again, we see a parenthetical citation that matches the works cited entry perfectly. And feel free to go through and notice how each time there's a parenthetical citation, that information there matches the first piece of information that you're going to see for a source on the works cited page. Okay, further down on page 3, I made a note here to emphasize the first sentence of each body paragraph identifies the main topic or idea for the paragraph, for the whole paragraph. So the writer's very clear about their purpose for writing all through the paper. Each paragraph has a topic sentence that expresses the idea, and each paragraph is consistent in aligning with that idea throughout the whole paragraph, all the way through to the end. So even as sources are being incorporated, the sources are related to the main idea, and the writer really manages to stay on track for an idea most of the time in each of the paragraphs here. Now we're on page 4, and I make a note here that the writer, most of the paper is really the writer's own ideas. Research is used sort of sparingly to support their ideas, but most of the writing is the actual writer's ideas, explanations, discussions of reasoning, discussions of anecdotes or experience. So this writer uses their sources very sparingly, and that's a very expert way to write a research paper. Okay, so, and I'm going to work through a little bit quickly here, but all of the ideas and all of the points I've made about this paper are true all the way throughout. They're true throughout for each of the body paragraphs, each of the pages, all of these citations, all of these explanations. The writing is just really strong in this paper. All right, so the next note that I make is at the bottom of page 5. I say that the visual source is referenced directly in the paragraph, and the information from the source is explained. So here we have a straightforward topic sentence. Due to low female representation in certain STEM careers, some women also worry about gender discrimination. The chart below offers statistics proven by research that women face gender discrimination in the STEM environment at a higher rate than men. So, okay, the chart below is mentioned, and when we scroll below, we do see a chart. And we do see it's titled, Among Those in Computer Jobs, Women Are Much More Likely Than Men to Experience Discrimination at Work. We have all of these numbers and statistics. Now, rather than have the reader make sense of all of these numbers and statistics, the paragraph itself goes on to explain the summary, basically. So just like if you were using a written source in your paragraph and you were using information from that written source, you would summarize or paraphrase some of that information. And that's what's happening in this paragraph, is that the information presented in the chart is being summarized so that readers don't have to do the work of analyzing this visual. Rather, the writer took it upon themselves to analyze it and then summarize it for readers to make it more persuasive for readers rather than to interrupt the flow of reading the paper, which certainly readers can do. They might stop and they might want to analyze the visual on their own, but it's important for you as the writer to make sure that you're summarizing that information for readers so that you can ensure that readers interpret the information in the way that you want them to. So you're the driving force here. You want readers to be persuaded, then you have to facilitate that. And one way to do it is to summarize those visuals and make sure that readers understand them the way you want them to. Once again, source citation, it matches the works cited. That's for the visual source. Visual sources also come with captions. So we see a caption here, figure 2. There are some additional resources in this week's lecture that talk to you about how to cite visuals. And I make a note here that the visual is placed directly in the paper with a caption. So you need to copy and paste that visual right in your paper wherever you determine it makes the most sense to present the information from the visual. So you need to think about that structure once again, the order of the ideas and the order of research and where you want to present it, and that's how you work with your visual sources, just like you would your written sources. Okay, so my next comment is here almost toward the end of page 7. And I bring to light that the writer has presented a counter argument. It's presented toward the end of the paper here. That's probably the most common choice that writers make, is to present a counter argument at the end. But certainly you can present a counter argument in the beginning of the paper if that's going to be an attention-grabbing strategy, and if that is actually going to pique readers' interest more, especially readers who might be resistant to your topic or to your idea. It might help to begin with the counter argument so that those readers feel understood and like their viewpoints are being recognized before you get into your own views on a topic. And this writer does a great job working with the counter argument. They present different versions of the counter argument throughout the next couple paragraphs. And that brings us to almost the end of page 8, where I leave a comment that this paragraph and the one before it are written without any sources at all. The writer uses only their own ideas in this paragraph and the one before. So, you know, I'm not saying any of your paragraphs have to be without sources per se. I'm only remarking that it's impressive that a student in the middle of a research paper, or as they're winding down their research paper, is able to write a large bulk of the text without any research at all, because they have thought clearly and carefully about the topic, and they have thought about what they want to say about it and the examples that they want to use, the reasons that they want to use. And that's what this student has done, and has been able to present very persuasive ideas without using any sources. And the idea that that's possible might even be kind of revolutionary to you. Like, normally you think of writing a research paper, you may think that every single paragraph needs to incorporate a source. But that's not true. You can write a persuasive paragraph or two and not incorporate any sources. And I think that this is a great example of that. Okay, so we're starting to wind down the paper here. We're on page 9. Toward the end of page 9, I mention that the writer is acknowledging the complexity of the issue. And I think this is so important. This is the conclusion paragraph. It's kind of nice that the conclusion paragraph does not begin with the phrase "in conclusion." And if you feel like you're really struggling to know how to begin your last paragraph and you're just like, I just really want to put a phrase there that says something like in conclusion, go ahead and write the rough draft of the paragraph that way. This paragraph could absolutely read, in conclusion, the challenges facing women in STEM careers is a complex issue with multiple viewpoints. That's a great point. But if we can imagine this sentence with the phrase in conclusion, then we can certainly appreciate the sentence without it. So if you're struggling to write that last paragraph, feel free to start it with in conclusion and then write the paragraph and then go back and just nix that phrase entirely. You can omit the phrase and the paragraph is going to sound like a conclusion paragraph based on how you've worded the sentences and how the tone that you're using. It's clearly bringing things to a close, and you're going to be able to show that with your writing without using the phrase in conclusion. And indeed, this writer does do that. I believe everyone in the STEM field should be given a chance to succeed. I also believe that everyone should be comfortable in the STEM environment, especially women. I hope that my research has spread some awareness on the issue. Schools and employers should stand side by side with women by handing out scholarships, creating more career opportunities, closing the gender wage gap, as well as hiring more women in leadership positions. All of these ideas were touched upon in the paper itself. It is important to encourage and motivate women and young girls to pursue STEM since the field needs to keep up with the innovation of science, math, and technology. Someday, a woman might find a cure for cancer, or a woman might develop groundbreaking technologies. I'm aware that we cannot fix the issue of the STEM gender gap overnight, though I believe that the gender gap can shrink slowly if more institutions encourage women to pursue STEM and find methods to help women overcome the challenges of the field. And the closure that you sense there as a reader is exactly what you want to try to achieve in your conclusion paragraph. You're kind of summarizing a lot of the ideas from the paper and then reiterating the claim that you made at the beginning and why you think it's important. And so that's kind of what my note says here. Writer admits that the problem is complicated, but encourages the solution that's mentioned in the claim. And that brings us to the end of this paper. As you scroll down to the works cited, we have a perfect works cited page. Excuse me. The works cited, it's perfect in every way. Sources are alphabetized and formatted with the hanging indent. All information is included and correct. For each citation, all information that is available is included: the author, the title, the publisher, in this case, the volume, the page information. This is a Macomb source, which you can tell here. So the student probably copied and pasted the citation from the Macomb Library website, which is an advantage for using the website. And then all the information is perfect, perfectly formatted. Title of sources are in quotes, title of publishers in italics. All of the punctuation is spot on, and everything looks great here. There's no extra line spaces between the citations. It's all uniformly double spaced throughout, and that's what we want to see in your final research paper. So I hope that taking a few moments to go through one of the research papers and really point out all of the most effective features of the paper has been helpful. I hope that you can take some of these pointers and, kind of translate them into your own writing, into your own thought process for how you're going to organize your paper, how you're using your sources. Are you doing that responsibly, or is most of your paper, written with paraphrases and summaries and quotes from your sources? If that's the case, then try to balance your paper out so that more of your ideas are driving the paper and your argument is really coming through. Your ideas are really the focus of the paper. That's what we want to see in our final draft of the research argument. Alrighty, that's all. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns, and good luck with your writing.